It's podcast day. It's podcast day. Welcome in. Friends, welcome makers one and all. I am Mars, otherwise known as heyBrownBerry, here on the interwebs. Welcome to my corner of the YouTubes. I just thought I would sit down today and do a quick recording. I am pushing myself to share with you when I feel I have something to share and to not let the logistics and the technology be the reason that I don't hit record. So I am literally gathering things in my lap as I speak so that I can show you some things, which reminds me there is something else I need to grab. Oh, good. It was literally within arm's reach. Okay, we'll get to that. Welcome in. I'm happy you're here. And I start these recordings knowing that each time I publish one of these videos, you all grace me with the most amazing feedback and comments. And I think it's a big part of why I continue to do this. Every video represents a swell of engagement as you all tell me how you felt about what I talk about out here. And I also enjoy the way you talk to each other in the comments here on YouTube, and how we find each other in other places like Instagram. I spoke to my friend Ann Choi today of Middlebrook Fiberworks and really feel like the next 12 months of my life are going to be full of some very rich and enriching things. Thank you for that, Ann. And she encouraged me to use my desire to do more writing in general and to introduce writing into my maker life as a jumping off point, and told me that a great way to do that would be to write show notes for my podcast episodes. And not just a general summary of links, but to really write some things to you as part of the descriptions that belong below each video. I did not do that today, okay? Let's just put the cards on the table right now. I have not done that. However, the whole chat with her and coming to a decision about something that I can welcome into my next several months of being reminded me how things continue to evolve and why it's good to tell people your plans and how interconnected so much of our making can be. Talking about writing notes to you in the description box of my YouTube video where I present other making content just feels like this very exciting opportunity to bring together things that I love. So be on the lookout for that. In this episode, I think one of the reasons I didn't write show notes this time around is just because I only wanted to be here with you for a little bit and share some current pieces. And I plan to put in some video snippets as well of some making that I've done earlier in the summer. I have things that I'm constantly taking pictures of or filming, and I don't always know how they're going to fit into a specific episode or the theme of an episode if there is one. So instead of putting a lot of pressure and boundaries around that, I will just use that as additional little bits to share with you, whether they happened last week or several months ago. Hope you're okay with that. You're here. We'll just go with it. Today I am wearing something I did want to talk about. I'm wearing a t-shirt from the ggmadeit.com shop. It is her Natural Knitter logo. You can see there's a gorgeous woman of color on her knitting couch. She's got her needles and this stunning fro. I aspire to a full head of fluffy hair like that. Yeah, Gigi Made It. You may know her. She's Gigi Made It on Instagram, and she has the website gigimadeit.com. And oftentimes she has just great products out there with local logos and images that I think are representative of so many beautiful things in our community. And I love this shirt, so I thought I'd tell you about it. I am not sponsored by gigimadeit.com. I am working on a sweater project, the Citrine Pullover. I shared this in a previous podcast episode and have made some progress. So this is a bottom-up pullover that is knit in pieces and seamed, and this is, I'm going to look at my marker, this is the front piece, and I know that because I put a specific color marker on there to indicate the front versus the back. And it starts with a twisted rib hem into a primarily stockinette body with a really cool side seam detail that continues the twisted ribbing. So I'm working concurrently on the front and back pieces. So this is the back. This piece was chosen as the back because if you notice down here at the bottom of the ribbing, there's a little bit of flare that's happening, which when placed over my posterior might actually be a great design element, but was not intentional. I started this project by knitting on some wooden Knit Picks needles. I think they're the Harmony colorful wood needles, which I've knit with in the past. But the gauge with this Mayak 100% yak yarn was so much looser. I mean, even in looking at just the ribbing, you can see that the bottom stitches are a bit more loose and not as organized as those going up towards the body. So those wooden needles plus this yak yarn created a much looser gauge, which I didn't really notice until I cast on for the front using my my metal Addy rocket squared, and started, same part of the project, and noticed how much neater this ribbing is. I thought, well, the size of the needles is the same, so it's not that. Turns out it was just the material. The things you can discover just by doing two pieces at once. I'm loving knitting on this. Do you have sweaters on the needles? Can you tell me about them? Because I like to live vicariously through your projects. I'm making this one for myself because I love the yarn and I also love the style of the sweater. And I talked a bit more about that in my last episode. Working concurrently makes me feel like I'm making so much progress with each knitting session. I have done this with sock projects as well, where I work both socks on two separate sets of needles. And there's something about doing that that just makes me feel like each time I sit down to work on either of the pieces, I'm just making that much more progress. It could be more of a mental thing than anything. In the US, it is autumn officially. Fall is here, and sweater knitting is highly encouraged. So I'm just going to share with you a couple of things that came in the mail recently. There are no structured segments here. Strap in. Go with the flow. I recently bought a maker's tote from Joanna of Stitching the High Notes. Check out this print. Ice cream and yarn and thread and scissors and needles and hooks, and it's all in here. Joanna is a seamstress extraordinaire. I will link to her shop below. This is her logo. Stitching the High Notes, because Joanna is a trained opera singer. And she lives on the West Coast, the other side of the country from me, but we have long been internet friends. And she makes these gorgeous bags in well-chosen fabric that she then sews impeccably. So this one, I think the intent is that you could use it for stitching projects like embroidery or cross stitch. And so it's flat, rectangular. I will use it for all sorts of projects. I may use it for knitting projects, but I bought it with the intent that I could put my empty embroidery hoops and some fabric and some embroidery floss in here as a motivator to just try some stitching. I don't currently embroider to any degree, but I am fortunate to have a lot of the tools that one needs for embroidery. And I have the desire to do it. I really enjoy looking at embroidered pieces. I even love watching embroidery videos where someone is just showing themselves stitching a motif or demonstrating a stitch type. Do you do that too? There's something very soothing, even as I'm knitting, about watching someone do another craft. Maybe that's just a multitasker, unfocused brain thing, but I like to see people's process anyway. But the slow and intentional movement that comes with things like embroidery is something I find very pleasing to watch. Quite often here on YouTube, videos where people are demonstrating or sharing their projects without much else happening, there will be some calming music and you just get to see shapes come to life in stitches. And there's, color play and other things. And embroidery, as I see it, has that blissfully repetitive, meditative motion, which is what draws me to it. So I have the desire, I have the resources to learn, I have containers for the materials. Now I just need the practice, which requires the courage, which requires getting over myself and just starting. I'll let you know how that goes. A couple other things arrived in the mail. I have had the good fortune of working with a couple of companies this year for publications. Earlier this year, I had an article in Taproot Magazine, which is a company that produces an ad-free, maker-focused magazine with patterns and recipes, articles and stories. And I was very proud of the opportunity to submit my writing and have it published through Taproot. And I've also had a sock pattern published in the Lina Magazine 52 Weeks of Socks book. And these processes are all different in the way they're structured and how you submit and get your work put out there. But each time I have learned something about my own personal approach, whether by planning or by accident. I've learned how I respond to deadlines. I've learned how I feel when working on something based on how much of the structure was determined by me and how much was predetermined by the format that exists. I'm very grateful to have had the opportunity to do that more than once. It is something that challenges me, not just in the creation of whatever the item is, but it challenges my ego. It challenges my time management skills. It has me communicating and networking with people that may not otherwise have been in my space. So in that way, it's a growth point, and I'm very happy to have done it. I don't think it's something that I push to do regularly. Being honest, it's not that I'm looking to constantly have patterns in every book that's out there, but certain opportunities speak to me. If you have followed me on Instagram and seen the kinds of things that I like to do in collaboration, I'm really working to become a person who chooses my partnerships very carefully and who intentionally goes into collaborations knowing that the end product is about representation, is about moving us forward, is about lending another voice to a space where such voices may have not been represented in the past. And so if you see me working with someone, know that those conversations have likely taken place or that I'm working toward that. Anyway, in my recent mail haul, y'all who have been here before just know that where my thoughts are, so are my words, and I will share with you. I have recently received a publication in the mail that I contributed to, and it's the By Hand Serial Lookbook 13. That's the name. Here's the front cover. This is Lookbook 13, and its focus is Northern California. By Hand Serial is a place-based book. I hesitate to say magazine. I think my friend Paige the Framer has commented on this as well. They may be referred to as magazines because that's a traditional format, but these are books, like rich pages, thick, colorful, beautiful spreads, just meaty content, full content. So I call it a book. And I contributed a sock pattern to this book. Being a place-based magazine and the fact that it was about Northern California, my contribution for a pattern has nothing to do with me being a California resident, because I'm not. I live in South Florida. It was more about the aesthetic and the theme of this book, and also a concept that I wanted to explore in this sock pattern. So here are those socks. And I'll turn this so you can see them. These are my Navigate socks. These were knit in Sincere Sheep yarn. The Eureka Fingering, the dyer, produces this, again, a place-based yarn, this 100% Rambouillet wool, and the colorway shown here is Hathor's Gem. And these are socks using a texture pattern that I thought really called to mind direction and movement and how we navigate scenarios. And that was part of the aesthetic that was cultivated in this book. So if you haven't gotten a copy yet of By Hand Serial, I recommend it not just because I'm in there. I am very proud of that, but also because there are other makers and patterns represented in here and articles that I actually found enlightening and things that just made me glad that I came into contact with these other makers. The dyer of the yarn that I used is a natural dyer who's doing some beautiful things with color. Her name is Brooke, and I think her last name is Sinnes. And she also has an article in here. Let me see if I can share with you. Like, here's just a view of Brooke's naturally dyed yarn. And she talks about the process of natural dyeing and what the challenges are and the opportunities of, using plants and local materials to create these very rich colors. Natural dye doesn't always get the same fanfare for saturated colors as, say, acid dyes or commercial dyeing processes, but you can tell through just this one article and this one dyer that the opportunity is limitless for creating a color palette and for using it on both yarn and fabric. It was my pleasure to work with Brooke's yarn. It was my pleasure to use a very carefully sourced, well thought out material that was naturally dyed. And as with many of my designs, I like the thought of using stitches to communicate a concept. I love to introduce, whether it's texture or a technique, that maybe will stay with you beyond that one project. Either you use the technique again, or the concept that I feel is represented is one that stays with you even after you make those socks. Or you complete that shawl. So many thanks to the By Hand team and to Brooke. It was actually, I'm just thinking back to this process, it was actually quite an enjoyable process. I'm new to this in terms of publishing patterns or working my patterns into a publication, so I have to give thanks for a positive process. And then a book that I haven't appeared in but I'm so happy exists is the latest Pom Pom. Everything you need to know about why I bought this book is on the front cover. This beautiful, beautiful being as the cover model, wearing a stunning Intarsia sweater designed by my friend Sylvia Watts-Cherry and guest edited by Ocean Rose, who I was very fortunate to meet at an Edinburgh Yarn Festival. I just had a chance a couple days ago to really flip through this. Being, you know, on Instagram or other places, it's easy to preview and get a sense of what's in there. It's another thing altogether to have it in your hands and stop on a page and really digest what's there. Here's Ocean Rose, the guest editor. She models a few of the projects in this book. This one in particular is called Naya. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, which was designed by another friend of mine. It was Malia May Joseph. Here's a closer look at it. And I got to see Malia working on the samples for this. And I was so excited that she had decided to submit to this particular issue. Malia is not a designer necessarily by trade. She has designs available, but she runs Stephen and Penelope. And just the fact that I've met this person, I've met the person and become friends with the person who designed this shawl, and it's in this magazine, which is chock full of so much representation, makes this a keepsake for me. It's milestone moments like this where so much good comes together in one thing that remind me why I am even part of this community and why I continue to support where I can, because then things like this can become a reality. Now what projects to pick? The thing about gorgeous books full of lovely things to make is that they're gorgeous books full of lovely things to make. We shall see. No pressure. No pressure.
Yeah.
It's Socktober! It is Socktober. Socktober. I'm a sock knitter. I'm a sock designer. Could I be more excited about a month in the year? Probably not. Actually, there's plenty of reasons for me to be excited throughout the year. This just happens to be one of them. Last week, I was so fortunate to sit down and do an Instagram live with Denise, who is Earthtones girl. She is also sock obsessed and happens to be an excellent teacher, designer, and lover of all things sock knitting. So we did an Instagram live to launch Socktober on October 1st. That's actually available on my Instagram at heyBrownBerry. And I saved it as a IGTV video so you can watch how we spent a blissful lunch hour talking all things socks. And many of you may have been in the audience of that live. I have kicked off my Socktober with a bang. I actually started this latest work in progress before Socktober. These are my R&R Socks. And I am knitting these as part of Denise's Falling Leaves sock cal. I talked a bit about them in the last episode and told you about the yarns that I'm using, one of which is naturally dyed. The other is handspun. That's this here. And I'm showing it again in case you have not yet seen that episode. So this is a John Arbon Textiles fiber that I used. They're Yarnadelic Corriedale, and spun a 2-ply for these socks. And this is some naturally dyed merino alpaca nylon that was naturally dyed by my friend Hannah Thiessen, who is on the By Hand Cereal team. And I'm putting them together into my pattern for the R&R Socks, Rest and Rejuvenation Socks. A very simple 2-color repeat pattern that makes single row stripes on the back and a gorgeous crosshatch pattern on the front. Working away on these, really happy to have them as part of the Falling Leaves Sock Cal, and now taking them into Socktober, a month in which we are encouraged to knit all things socks, crochet all things socks. Do you make socks from other crafts? Are people weaving fabric for socks? I haven't seen that. Sewing? Stockings? Maybe. That totally counts. As I was working away on these, with my toe-up sock patterns, I traditionally do a Flegel heel. And I think what I'll do is, at some point, find a way to talk in depth about more of my, the details of the choices that I make when putting together a pattern. Essentially, the sock patterns that I've made with a toe-up construction, I have typically used what I call a basic gusset heel, also known as a Flegel heel, which is a pretty simple to execute heel done by symmetric increasing to create the gusset. But I was getting to the point where it was time for the heel on these socks, and I thought, one of the things I love about knitting is that you are the boss of that project. And so I decided to do a heel flap and gusset using a technique that I introduced in my Walk Good Socks pattern, where as you're knitting the sock, you begin to make what I call a heel pad on the bottom of the sock using a traditional slip one, knit one, slip stitch heel. And as it says in my Walk Good Socks pattern, you knit this heel pad first, and then you pick up stitches from the heel pad to create the gusset. If you've ever knit a pair of socks and you've done a traditional top-down sock with the heel flap on the back, and then you pick up stitches to create the gusset as you move into the foot, then you'll be familiar with what I'm talking about. Essentially, I've taken that and reversed it. And the reason I've done that is because this slip stitch patterning is a bit more dense and it has a great use sitting on the bottom of your sock foot. It's reinforced, and it's naturally reinforced. When you do a slip one, knit one pattern, every time you slip a stitch and carry over some yarn to knit the next stitch, you're leaving a bit of a float on the wrong side. And put together, that makes a nice dense fabric. That reinforcement does a lot on the bottom of a sock, especially at the heel, an area where many people wear through their socks, present company included. So I do that heel pad, I call it. It's the heel flap really, but it's on the bottom. So I do that heel pad, and then I pick up stitches to create the gusset. I still do my heel turn with short rows, and then I move up into the leg of the sock. Hopefully I've described that in a way that makes sense. So I took one pattern for color technique and construction, and another pattern's heel component, because that's just what I wanted this time around. And then I will continue the R&R color pattern up the leg. So Socktober will definitely motivate me to work on these. Guys, just wanted to pop in here and say that I want to encourage you, if you are also sock knitting this month for Socktober 2020, Denise, Earthtones girl, and I are both running Socktober 2020 knit-alongs, make-alongs in our Ravelry groups. If Ravelry is accessible to you and you'd like some company while you knit socks this month, please head over to either of our groups. Double dip as we make along in there. There are prizes and great chatter with other sock makers. So join us, okay? Join us. I am working concurrently. YouTube thumbnail. I am working concurrently on both socks. This one does not have its heel pad yet, just the body so far. I tend to work in segments, so now that I've reached this heel flap on this sock, I'll probably go all the way to the point where I'm ready to do the heel turn and pick up stitches for the gusset, put that down, and then work on doing the same for the second one. That tends to help me move through it. This little bag is what I'm knitting my projects in. Show that to you. It's a little drawstring bag that I made, and my sock project is living in there. The bottom of this is made from a pair of jeans that my daughters no longer fit. It's got the cutest little Remembrances pottery button on the sides because I adore Natalie's ceramic work. Little tab for holding my progress keepers. And it has a drawstring channel made from some naturally dyed cotton fleece that I played with last summer. I loved working on that. And then it's just lined with some orange quilter's cotton from Mustache. I love making drawstring bags. I love sewing them. I love constructing them out of multiple pieces. And this one actually holds the 4 cakes of yarn and the 2 socks in progress. Love it. Oh, this fabric. I didn't talk about this fabric. This fabric is by Anna, who used to run the Dunkelgrün podcast. This was her logo, and she actually had fabric printed through Spoonflower. And I bought some. It's a cotton jersey, very soft and squishy. She is quite the artist. Yeah. Friends, that is all I wanted to share with you in terms of project updates. I think what I'll do is I'll just attach some video to the end of this, maybe with voiceover, maybe just music. Either way, we'll see what happens on the editing floor, as they say. I am happy to have an opportunity to come back and chat with you. I'm so glad that we can be as connected as we want, and that you continue to show me that it's worth showing up here. Thank you for that. My wish for you for this week is that you find as much or as little connection as you need to keep going, because I'd love to see you back here again. Thank you for joining me. Enjoy a little bit of quiet time at the end of this episode, and I'll see you next time. Bye. Mwah.